Welcome to Mindful Live 124. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. This is currently the 24th of the 8th month, 2022. And we're on 124. Wow, what a coincidence. Wednesday nights as intentioned, and I am accustomed to those bands. I play them as is intentioned. Wednesday nights will be Tobago nights, and I'm streaming live now on Instagram and TikTok, and live also on YouTube. If you are streaming this over on Instagram or TikTok, you can feel free to head over to my YouTube channel and subscribe over there, Nathan Springer on YouTube. Simple like that, and you'll be able to catch up on all the lives you missed, because we are Mindful Live 124. If you're someone that is exceptionally good at math, you may be able to figure out there were 123 other mindful lives like this. And they are located over there on my YouTube channel, also on the YouTube channel. When you hear me reading, I don't know who this Hat Queen Sana is over on TikTok, but ma'am, I have no interest with going live with you right now. My apologies. But yes, I don't know if his trip was a bust, but we're going to find out about some of the things he said while he was on this trip, because Wednesday is intentioned as Tobago Day. That's, wow. Oof. That's this island you see right here. This island you see right here. This is Trinidad. This is Tobago. That's Tobago right there. And it's our sister island. And they should have a good seat at the table. So Wednesdays, we talk about Tobago. The Donma one says Tobago is paradise. I do not deny that, sir. I do not deny that. All right. Now, let me just dive into that story and see what the Deputy Chief Secretary of Tobago had to say. Deputy Chief Sec calls for Tobago's self-determination. Now, that word right there, good evening, Scafty, is a problematic word to me, because I am not sure exactly what they mean when they say self-determination, to be very honest. I am not very sure. When you say self-determination as Tobago, what exactly do you mean? THA Deputy Chief Secretary Watson Duke is calling for self-determination for Tobago. Duke, the electoral representative for Roxborough Argyle, was delivering the feature address during the Caribbean Diaspora Investment Forum's Invest Tobago Town Hall meeting at the Brooklyn Museum, New York on Monday. He said there is a need for Tobago to have an equal status with Trinidad. Thank you, Siobhan Popti. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. That's why we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago. If you're asking where I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a Trini, a proud Trini, a Trini. And they love how Trini does cook, and talk, etc., etc. Determinism is based on reason and conviction. Okay. I understand that in the human context. Yes, I know what self-determination is in the human context, but when you're talking about a country being part of another country, well, an island being part of another country, because we're Trinidad and Tobago, that's our country. When you're talking about self-determination, what exactly do you mean by that? He said there's a need for Tobago to have an equal status with Trinidad. Tobago is not an equal island with Trinidad. Since 1889, we have never been, and that is a legal issue. We are never equal. We are a ward of Trinidad. I totally disagree. I saw you at the Agri Expo, Mr. BDS says, yes, I was there. I enjoy those expos, and I'll be down at TIC this coming weekend. If you all are interested in the trade and investment convention, head over there. This isn't a sponsored plug, but nonetheless, they will be having that convention this weekend. Head over there. it will be good, and I will be there. I'm not sure which day or days yet, but I will be there. But he says Tobago is a ward of Trinidad. I disagree. Come, no, it was not a papi show. It really was not. It was actually a really well done Agri Expo. Many of the small and medium enterprises have come out saying that they enjoyed it, that they saw the benefit of it, they saw the reward of it. My mother, who does some farming on her own also, she went down there and she enjoyed herself. Many people who do their own small farming, kitchen gardens, medium farms, tiny farms, large farms, they went down and it was well done actually. I disagree with that whole papi show nonsense talk. It was actually well done. Good night, Wendy Medium XL. Anyway, back to Tobago being a ward of Trinidad. That's incorrect. Tobago is not a ward of Trinidad. If you're trying to use that context, I will phrase it as Tobago is a ward of Trinidad and Tobago, because the ruling government in Trinidad is not the government of Trinidad that rules over Tobago. It's the government of Trinidad and Tobago. You're part of the country. That's like Shaguanas saying they're a ward of Trinidad and Tobago. Like, no, you're part of the country. What are you talking about as a ward of the country? Can Miaro jump out and let's choose somewhere that there's a mayor. Can the mayor for San Fernando jump out and say, well, San Fernando is being a ward of Trinidad. We need some self-determination in San Fernando. Like, what are you talking about? You are part of the country. I don't understand. It's a big difference. I suppose you will tell me how, Bessie Loverboy. I don't understand what is the difference. If Tobago is to be part of the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, you are ruled by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. How are you a ward of Trinidad if you are part of the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago? In fact, the ruler of Trinidad and Tobago, the prime minister, the guy at the top, the guy making all the decisions, comes from Tobago. He's a Tobagonian. So are we in Trinidad to say that we are currently being ruled by the Tobagonians? No, that doesn't make sense. We are being ruled by a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Right? I really don't understand what's the point in that. Tobago can't make their own laws. Obviously, you cannot. Like, I don't understand what you are saying. San Fernando can't make their own laws. The borough of Arima, are they the oldest borough? Is that what they say? The borough of Arima cannot make their own laws. Can you believe that? Those Arimians are being deprived of the rights to make their own laws. Like, what are you talking about? You are part of the country. The Tobago problem, this is back to Mr. Duke speaking here. The Tobago problem is not Trinidad because our families exist there. Because our families exist there. They are our brothers and our sisters. The Tobagonian problem is the PNM. We want equal rights and justice. Give us our equal rights and justice with Trinidad. Although we are a ward of Trinidad, what that simply means, they take care of us. If we want an ID card, that has to be made in Trinidad. If you want a glasses, that has to be made in Trinidad. Anything imported, it has to come through Trinidad. The flour you eat, it comes through Trinidad. The sugar you eat, it comes through Trinidad. Okay? And you do not have a large enough port. And are there no glasses companies in Tobago? Roni, Mr. Bessie Loverboy, I know my history. If you have a point to say, make your point. Do not tell me go back through history to try and figure out what might be. The history between Tobago and Trinidad is enough to fill rooms of books. So which part of the history exactly are you talking about to go back through to understand this? Of course, I know Tobago was separate from Trinidad. Tobago was under the Colanders. Tobago was under the Dutch. Tobago was under the French. Yes, there's a difference. Yes, there's different history. So be it. But we are currently a unified country. Thank you, Stars Juliet. We are currently a unified country. We are one country, the country of Trinidad and Tobago. This isn't the only country like that in the world. There are many countries like that. There are different parts of the country that have different histories, and they are now one country. To complain that Tobago has to get a lot of its amenities, to complain that Tobago has to get a lot of its amenities from Trinidad, I don't understand what is the actual complaint there. That's actually a benefit to you. Or is it that you're saying Tobago has the money to build its own deep water port? By all means, if you can collect the taxes in Tobago, and collect so much taxes to go build your own deep water port to import everything you need, well, by all means. But then what's the point? What's the point? If you could get it just as easily from Trinidad. Okay, if you think separating that and going on the open market by yourself, on the global open market by yourself as an island with 40,000 people, if you think that would give you more strength in negotiation on the global market, well, for one, I have a bridge to sell you. And secondly, well, good luck with that. He said, deep within him, there is a dream for Tobago to be equal. I have never wanted to be a normal politician. I wanted to be by myself. I don't want to be an A.N.R. Robinson. I don't want to be no Patrick Manning, no Eric Williams. I don't want to be no Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. I just wanted to be myself. He said in his mind, independence in 1962 and republic status in 1976 should have elevated Tobago. Then again, the PNM was in charge. They don't care. As long as we are one, we can't plan our budget. We can't do anything. They have to give us whatever they feel to give us, whenever they feel to give us. That is what they're going to do. But as an island on an equal footing, we may just have the right to solicit elsewhere. We may have the right to come up with our own economic plan, our own social development. For one, Tobago does have a lot, 60,000 years. Tobago does have a lot of power on its own. We're talking about Tobago right now, Orlando Radix. We're talking about Tobago. And a statement made by the Deputy Chief Secretary over there in Tobago. Now, something that I pulled up, just to bring some context to all of this. Because he is saying they want equal footing. They want to be equal to Trinidad, stand on their equal footing. They don't want it that they have to ask Trinidad for anything. They don't want that. Now let's go over to something here. This is the revenue report. The draft estimates of revenue. Tobago House of Assembly. 2018, 204,488,000. Rounding it off. 2019, 223,292,000. Yeah, they got an improvement in 2019, 223 million. Tobago brought in revenue. Yeah, so Tobago wants to stand on its own with its own economic plan as on equal footing with Trinidad. Well, let's see the money. Let's see if the money adds up to that equal footing business. 2019, 215 million. 2020, 215 million again. So in the last 4 years, I don't have for 2021 or 2022. In the 4 years, 2020 to 2018, wow, that's not 4 years. What am I saying? In the 3 years, 2020 to 2018, the most they made was $223 million. Does anyone know what the budget was? Does anyone know what the budget was? How much money Tobago got in their last budget? Anyone knows what Tobago's budget spending was like? With 223 million, the max revenue they brought in the last couple of years, 223 million. How much do they spend per year? Anyone knows? Well, the last budget for the THA was $2.357 billion. That's with the B, the big B, billion. That is a magnitude, one magnitude higher than the revenue they make. They would have to make at least 10 times the amount they're making now to be able to maintain the amount they're spending now. And if we want to go down the line, and I don't want to call this necessarily bold-facedness, because as a twin island republic, I don't mind spending a lot on Tobago, because if this is a twin island republic where the residents of Trinidad and Tobago get to benefit from whatever happens over in Tobago, then by all means, I don't mind spending in Tobago. I don't mind. I don't mind that at all. Spend the money. Good night, Best Village TT. I don't mind spending the money over in Tobago. But just on a note of audacity, who is me? I don't know who is me. On a note of audacity, yes, I will talk about that. I don't know who is me, Best Village.tt. Who is me? Like, who is me? Oh, Ronnie. Okay. All right. Oh, Ria. Okay. Right. You see, you're trying to confuse me here. Blessed night, Southside Trinidad. Okay. Blessed night, Southside Trinidad. Good night, Ria. Good night. Yeah. On a note of audacity, do you know how much? Do you know how much this same THE is asking from the Trinidad and Tobago government that they don't really want to do anything with? We want to have our own economy. Do you know how much they requested in the budget this year? Anyone? Any idea how much they requested? Basically $4 billion. $4 billion. 4. If these are the 4 billion, look at this. You're seeing the 4 billion. This represents the 4 billion here. I can see why you're dressing. I don't understand what you're saying. This is the stressing. Oh, this is the 4 billion. If we're looking to check how much Tobago makes in comparison to how much they're requesting the 4 billion, they don't make this. They don't make this. They don't make this. They don't even make this. They make a quarter of this. Tobago makes about, I can't even form a finger like that. Tobago makes about this. And they're requesting this. And then the Deputy Chief Secretary would say that they want to run their own economy. They want to run their own economy. Why should it be that they have to ask Trinidad for money. Well, you have to ask Trinidad for money because you don't make as much as you want to spend. That's the simple answer. The reason you request money from Trinidad is because you don't make as much as you want to spend. And us being a twin island republic, we spend in different parts of the island as we see need. As we see need. Listen, if I was the PDP, and I wanted to get out there and say that I want to rule Tobago with our own economy on our own self-determination head, well, then the first thing I would have to do is start to dial back my budget. How could it be the same party is asking to separate themselves economically from Trinidad? They don't want that Trinidad and Tobago business, while at the same time increasing the amount of spending they spend per year when they already don't make enough to spend that much. How does that make sense? It's not asking Trinidad for money, it's asking the central government. Best Village TT, otherwise known as RIA, I understand what you're saying, but I am quoting it as the Deputy Chief Secretary said it. You may have been a little late in there. I'm going to requote what he said. As long as we are one, we can't plan our budget. We can't do anything. They have to give us whatever they feel to give us, whenever they feel to give us. That is what they're going to do. But as an island on equal footing, we may just have the right to solicit elsewhere. We may have the right to come up with our own economic plan, our own social development. Where does the money come from? They want to open up to foreign investment. I understand that. When he says solicit elsewhere, I understand that is what he's talking about. What, can someone answer me this? What foreign investment is able to increase Tobago's revenue by 10? Which kind of foreign investment is going to do that? Are they going to start to plant coca beans out there on the mountain range? Are they going to cut down the whole main ridge forest reserve and plant cocaine plants? Because that's how you make that kind of money. Buns Sef's Boutique says, do you think people just invest their buns in a random island for nothing? Like, someone who has buns of a couple billion, they're just going to see Tobago. Oh, you're free now? We're just going to give you that extra 10 times your revenue. For what? For what? I don't understand that. He said as a result, Tobago needs self-determination. Self-determination is really a cardinal principle rooted in international law. Self-determination really says that the people of Tobago would sit and could determine for themselves their political status. What exactly are we talking about here? I don't understand. Like, I am trying to figure out when he says self-determination, but not leaving Trinidad, but getting self-determination. What are you talking about there? What exactly do you mean? You know what that sounds like to me? You know what it sounds like? The dream there is that Tobago gets the right to govern all of everything, and Trinidad and Tobago must split the revenue of Trinidad and Tobago half and half. So the total revenue of Trinidad and Tobago must be split half and half, and Tobago could go with that half and decide how to spend it. That's not how reality works. That's just not how it works. It's just not how it works. If you were to go down that self-determination very strong road, that means Trinidad's money has to be Trinidad's money, and Tobago's money has to be Tobago's money. It's like Ask the question, the Danma. It's like if you're a child, let's say you're 21 years old, you're no longer a child, you're a young adult. But as with many of us millennials, you still reside with your parents. You still reside with your parents. If you reside with your parents and you go to your dad and say, Pops, I want to determine everything I do for myself in this place. Very likely Pops will say, okay, you can leave, find your own place. You cannot then expect that your Pops is still going to give you your weekly allowance. You would have to go work, and how much ever you make in minimum wage or not, you're going to have to use that to survive. You cannot at the same time say, I want to row my own boat. I want to row my own boat, but I must take your engine to row my own boat. It doesn't work like that. It just does not. Could be liquidating the country's securities, but something has to be sacrificed. PNM or UNC loses the Tobago seats. Would you be saying the same thing? I don't understand what you're asking there, Danma. If PNM or UNC loses the Tobago seats, to whom? To the PDP? You mean if the PDP wins the 2 Tobago seats, then they will be in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. They would be in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Either way, they will be in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, if Tobago does a referendum or something, and we recognize that the majority of Tobagonians do not like this Twin Island Republic thing, then, to be honest, okay. I am cool with you determining that you want to leave the partnership, but you have to understand the reality of what that means. I think it's possible, Nathan, especially when we see examples of it in the Caribbean. It will take 10 plus years along with a large investment to develop the hotel industry. Yes, it will. And what do you do in the 10 plus years? What will happen? Because the same way we say the government hasn't properly tried to diversify the economy, maybe Tobago thinks that given the resources, they can make profit. Given the resources from whom, Ria? From whom? From whom? Where do the resources come from? And if you are to get the resources from someone, how can you say, I will get the resources from them, I will get the resources from them, but on the flip side, I determine how all of these resources will be spent? That does not make sense. As a Trinidadian, Trinidad and Tobago, but I live in Trinidad. I was born in Trinidad. As a Trinidadian paying taxes, my business pays taxes, whatever. As paying taxes here, do you think it fair that they can take some of my taxes, send it over to Tobago, and Tobago alone has the choice in how that is spent? Taxation without representation is theft. If you take my money and you spend it and I have no say in how it is spent, that is theft. Throwing it out there, but a bridge would be a good start, but our leaders are too small-minded. I totally agree. Like down that line, you're not getting any argument from me there. If a bridge between Trinidad and Tobago is feasible, by all means, build one. Please, 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 please. I think that would be very good. At that goat, I don't agree with asking for so much, but I understand when they think they can do better. All right, Ria, you say let you up. You didn't request. You have to request for me to let you up. If they're able to control it, well, that's another thing. That's another thing. How do we know that they're going to spend it better? Are we, as Trinidadians from the country of Trinidad and Tobago, just supposed to throw more money at them? For what? For what? Because already we see where they're spending the money. They increased the spending for URP. They increased the spending for CPEP. They increased the amount of people employed by the THE. Now, Tobago has problems. The majority of the workers in Tobago are hired and work for the Tobago House of Assembly. for the government. How are you supposed to increase the amount of revenue you make by increasing the amount of people that work for the government? Those things don't go hand in hand anywhere in the world. It does not. From the time you see 75% of your workforce works for the government, you know that this country is getting money from somewhere else, because that is not efficient. It never is. Next general election, PDP will take their 2 seats, UNC won't contest, and PNM will lose. Then what will happen? Then the PDP will have 2 members in parliament. Like, you understand how Trinidad... You do understand how Trinidad's electoral system is made up. Even if you win the 2 Tobago seats, that does not give you ruling power over Tobago. The 2 Tobago seats gives you a seat in parliament, so they can go in parliament. If they win the 2 Tobago seats, they will go in parliament. If PNM is still the government, then they will sit on the opposition bench. If UNC is the government, if they choose to join with the UNC, then they will be in a partnership. If they choose not to join with the UNC, they will remain on the opposition bench. And they will be allowed to raise questions in parliament, vote on laws for the country of Trinidad and Tobago. That does not give them automatic ruling power over Tobago. That's not how all of this works. The thing is, even if Tobago does a referendum and goes out there and asks every resident and citizen of Tobago if you want to leave the Union of Trinidad and Tobago, and everyone says yes, that still doesn't mean you could leave. That's up to Trinidad and Tobago's parliament. That's the nature of our governing system. They are tanking the economies of the Caribbean countries to move to a debt. Oh, you're going down a different line. I don't disagree with you either. I don't disagree with that. I like that, though, breaks up the duality in government. Now, I wouldn't mind a third party in government. I wouldn't mind that, but I'm not one to believe that just any change would be better change. I'm not necessarily one to believe that. And the kind of reckless talk I hear from that side, I'm unsure how much I want them in our government. Trinidad and Tobago's parliament. Now, the part of the interesting thing with all of this to me is that this man, while at the same time talking that, give us my opinion on what? A lot of this is my opinion. The same man, while saying that self-determination business over there in Tobago, is here in Trinidad trying to win elections in Trinidad. Like, that's some serious cognitive dissonance to me. Like, what is going on here? He wants to carry Tobago. He wants to be the leader to carry Tobago away from Trinidad, while at the same time wanting to lead in Trinidad too. Like, Empress Rooney says Duke should never sit in, not even in opposition. Now, he ended this by saying it's time to free our people back home. Remember, he's speaking in New York. Good night, Speaker Pelosi. It is time to free our people back home. We are not asking for separation. We are not asking to go alone. We want to be linked to Trinidad, if possible, linked to the rest of the Caribbean. Huh? What does that even mean? Linked to Trinidad and then say linked to the rest of the Caribbean. What are you talking about? Do you want some kind of Caribbean federation where we're all independent islands ruled in a federation or something? Like, what are you talking about? Question, do you find PNM and UNC did good for this country? No, not in general. No, I don't find so in general. I do not think so in general, but each party has done some good for the country. If you're asking if they did any good, I'll say yes, they did some good. If you're asking if they did good in general, to be honest, I'm not even sure how to answer that. We could look at the outcomes. Like, what would you consider good? Like, but later, Ria, what would you consider good? Like, if you're looking at the general outcomes of Trinidad compared to other places, Trinidad isn't the worst. Now, could it have been better? By all means. Could they have done better? By all means. Were they involved in corruption and malfeasance? By all means, yes. But I'm not sure the question is fully understood. Now, here's the thing. I like this Newsday article because they made sure to put in at the bottom there. In 2019, Duke said in a press conference it was time to free Tobagonians from bondage, not through internal self-governance, but through full independence from Trinidad. He said this separation was not a call for war, but instead for Tobago to have the chance to unlock its ability to grow its economy. So this man was at least speaking about full independence from Trinidad. I wonder, like to myself, I wonder how many Tobagonians actually want that. I wonder how many Trinidadians, not Trinidadians, Tobagonians actually want that. If I get to Tobago this year, I think I'll go around and ask that question. How many Tobagonians want to split this? They don't want this Trinidad and Tobago business anymore. They want Trinidad, Tobago. If they get that independence, the IMF going to own Tobago in 5 years. Yes, very likely. Very likely. The thing is, that's why I was saying, if I was the PDP and I was serious about going in that direction, the first thing I will do is start to draw down from my budget. I cannot go from a 2-point-something budget to basically a 4 billion budget and then say at the same time I want independence from the island that produces so that I can live like this. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. Trinidad produces more economic resources than Tobago. Factual matter. Facts. Trinidad produces the bulk. But as a twin island republic, it doesn't matter. We spend it where it's needed. But if you separate, then you'd have to live on what you produce. And we know already what you produce. $223 million. And you're spending 2.7 billion, and you want to spend around 4 billion. How do those things calibrate together? But for the most part, Tobago doesn't manage. But for the most part, doesn't Tobago manage most of their own affairs with funding from Trinidad? Yes, Nathan Rose's son. Yes. Yes, they do. And that's why he's being dishonest with that. To be honest with you, I have been saying I would like to see Ashaguana's House of Assembly. To be honest, I would like to see that. I would like to see more local areas in the whole island managed similarly to that Tobago model, where local people are more in control of what happens locally. I don't mind that. Where does that $250 million come from, Nathan? Is it mostly tourism and agriculture? Mostly tourism. Massimo Original says it's funny because if the allegory of a company and Tobago were to be utilized, Tobago is basically losing money year on year. Yes, they are. The math's not maths. And you see, but in the case of the Twin Island Republic, as a Trinidadian, we don't mind. Well, I can speak for myself generally, and I don't see many Trinidadians by and large complain about how much money we spend on Tobago. I don't think many people mind that because we know that we go over to Tobago and enjoy it. It's part of the Twin Island Republic. It's part of the Twin Island Republic. It's like if Toko needed some Dover, They needed to renovate something down in Toko, the lighthouse and all of that. They're going down there to do some work. And they decided they're going to spend an investment of 5 billion down in Toko. Once there's no corruption in the matter, I don't mind. Even though I do not live in Toko. And even though the taxes from Toko may not pay for that $5 billion investment, because we know as a country, we can all enjoy it. Build the bridge, build the bridge. I don't disagree with that. As I said, once a bridge is feasible, I don't mind that. Don't mind it at all. A bridge would be, if we were to build a bridge, almost surely it would be from that Toko and, yeah, that Toko and there. But part of the problem with that is that is open ocean to the east of us there. That's open ocean. So to build a bridge across open ocean will not be exactly a very easy thing to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not very easy. I wish each constituency had a house of assembly. Bro, same thing. Same thing with me. That's what I've been saying. I would like to see more constituencies run similar to Tobago, where you have a lot more independent self-determination within these constituencies. Now, according to this present government, their local government reform is supposed to work similar to that, giving more power and ability to the local governments, giving more power to the local governments to make decisions on their own. And I would like that. And as someone said, a sheriff, I would like that too. I would like if I could vote for my local government leaders and for a local sheriff for my area. I would love that. I would really like that. And I think if something like that was possible, we would see some of the stranglehold of the partisan politics breaking off a little bit. Like if you look over in the United States, where each state has its own governor, etc., 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 there are some states that where the whole state would vote Democrat, let's see, but then that same state would vote for a Republican governor, because in their local politics, they would like that right-wing style of policies. But in the national politics, they would like more left-wing style in policies. That is possible. And I think if we were to do that in Trinidad, we'll see some things like that. For example, the guy who was saying that PNM will lose the 2 seats in Tobago come next general election. I am not actually sure about that. The voting for the THA elections, for the House elections, is not the same thing as voting for general elections. And I don't think that Tobagonian voters do not have that in their mind. I don't think they are ignorant to that fact. So in the general elections, they would have different things to account for. So it's not, to me, it's not a sure thing that the PDP is going to win those Tobago seats. That's not a sure thing. It would make it better. It would be smaller and more concentrated. I agree. And I am all for decentralization. As much as possible, we want things decentralized. We don't want the power concentrated at higher levels. That's why I'm against globalism in the form that they're going now. This whole World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and those weirdos out there in Europe. I am not for that nonsense, because the more centralized things get, the more difficult it is for the small man. As the regular analogy I put out there is that the government is Gulliver, in those who know their old-time storybooks, the giant in the land of tiny people. You're a giant. The government is a giant. And there are tiny people around them that they can squash if they do not move carefully. It's very easy for the government and their great power to take advantage of individuals around. And the bigger the government gets, think of it as the bigger this giant gets in comparison with the small citizens out there. So if you have something close to a global style of government, that giant is so huge, they mash you and they don't know, nor would they care. They mash you and they wouldn't even know or care because they're that large. So as much as possible, decentralized. That's my aim. That's good, but many look how they can benefit themselves first. The thing is, there is benefit in centralization because, as the example I was putting, the larger the giant grows, the more it is capable of doing. A very big giant is capable of doing a lot as compared to the individuals. True. But that's the balancing act you have to make. We want governments because governments are capable of doing more than individuals can do. But the larger these governments and more centralized these governments get, the less they need to care about the individual. So even in our politics, we see it. Many of these politicians don't care for individual votes. They don't go out there trying to get the individual vote. They look at things in voting blocks. They look at it as, which block can I get to vote for me? Which group can I get to vote for me? Who do I lobby to bring this group for me? The individual, they could care less. They couldn't care less, rather. All right. That was Tobago. As I've said before, Wednesday we were talking Tobago, but Tobago wasn't the only issue. There was another issue that came up that I think I need to talk about. Hello from the United States. Hey, Vice President with 3 weird numbers there. What do you think about Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris being the most unpopular vice president in history. 26% is sad. Well, that's not surprising, because Kamala Harris was the most unpopular candidate for president too. Nobody liked her. She lost in her home state when she went up for the internal elections. She lost in her home state. Nobody likes her. She's not a very likable person. And then add to that the fact that she was the Attorney General doing some wicked stuff to men who went in jail for smoking weed, like non-violent criminal offenses, and kept them in jail longer than needed, longer than necessary, for slave labor, their 14th Amendment, which allows them basically to work these prisoners as slaves. So yeah, Kamala Harris deserves being disliked. There's no surprise there. And then the unfortunate thing in that is she was selected basically for her body parts and her melanin, which I find to be a ridiculous prospect. I would feel insulted if someone say, I only chose you for this job because you're black and you're a Trini. Like, no, bro. If you're choosing me for something, I would like you to choose me on my merit. But the US is a weird place. The US is a weird place. And I don't know how many of you take in news as I regularly say. I probably take in too much news for my own good, too much all kind of information. Have you ever heard that woman give a speech? Have you ever heard that woman give a speech? The things make no sense. I wonder if I could pull up, let me see if I could find on a quick Kamala speech. Let me see if I could find one of those to just play on a quick, because let me see, are they going to talk through this? I don't want you talking. All right. Let's see if we could pull up one of the Kamala speeches there. Listen, if you all ever...
latest to resign. She was her national secretary since I heard what that publicist is to work about helping their There's great significance and we were all see if you can follow this logic. The governor and I, and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children. Somebody should...
And the thing is, nearly all of her speeches are like that. Like nobody knows what she's talking about. When she was trying to explain Russia versus Ukraine, well, Russia is a bigger country, and the bigger country attacked the smaller. I don't know. I don't know. Like what is she talking about? Nah, don't do Trump that. I would not put Trumpy down there. Trump is a troll. Trump is a troll. His speeches may not be well refined, but he's a troll, and he's speaking to a target audience. And he speaks very clearly to his target audience. A prime example of this I remember from since in the 2016 election period, where they took a picture of him eating a steak, and he was eating it with ketchup, and the news ran with that, and they tried to lambast him with it. But what they fail to recognize is the target audience that he is aiming for is the lower income people who regularly do their steak well done and eat it with ketchup. He's aiming at a target audience, and now something very interesting is going on in the US. You all pulled me off on this tangent, you know. I'm getting back to Trinidad just now. Let me finish this. Something very interesting is going on in the US right now. If you look at the parties, typically during the 90s, early 2000s, the whites and even the highly educated whites leaned more to the Republican side, and the minorities lean more to the Democrats. Now you're seeing actually a switch in that, where Hispanics and the lower income, less educated people are leaning more to the Republican side, and the high income, highly educated white people are going more to the Democrat side. Use that information as you will, but that's exactly the intention of what Trump was doing. He is a populist. He was doing his populism biz. All right. But we're not talking about the United States right now. Massimo says, I think for that it was context-based. I think for the Ukraine-Russia situation, she was asked to explain. Doesn't matter. You can explain as a child to a child, making sense still. Trump was spitefully inflammatory, and it worked with his beast. I've heard some people speak about that, and Trump was the bull in a china shop. What happened in the United States, many of the lower classes, lower income people, believe that this refined politician business has been ruining them for decades. They voted for Obama looking for change. Within his first week in office, he drone bombed some children out in the Middle East, and they're like, what? No. And then you heard talk about the deep state, where people who are hired into government places, although governments change and change, they remain there doing the same thing over and over and over. So people wanted that bull in the china shop. People wanted to take a wild animal, throw them into this glass palace and mash it up. That was their intention. So, yeah. About our local business. So Dr. Rowley went out there to say that his hiring of Mr. Griffith was the worst decision he ever made. Now, that's quite a statement to make. Now, he based this on some investigations done into the whole firearm users licensing business, where they believe that Mr. Double G was giving out too many guns to the public. Let's jump over to that article and see how that goes. Gary blasts back at Rowley over guns. Huh. I got that news there. Gary blasts back at Rowley over guns. Ha ha. The Prime Minister says giving former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith a chance when the Police Service Commission said he was the best person for the job was the biggest mistake he ever made. Making reference to allegations of a bribery ring for firearm users' licenses, Dr. Rowley said, I have watched, I have listened, I have heard. We've taken steps one by one to the extent where we have just had an audit of the firearms department of the police service. It makes very, very troublesome reading. Now, in this, Dr. Rowley said some things that I totally didn't agree with. So he made the statement that giving citizens guns is not the solution to crime. I agree. Giving citizens guns will not solve our crime problems in Trinidad. It will solve some of the citizens' security problems, though. And I always find it ironic the way how so many world leaders that believe in strong gun control, so many of them always walk around with armed security. All of them have their private firearms, but they believe that the regular citizens of the country should not have them. And the example he raised was Japan. He said Japan has strong gun control laws. And we're seeing the result of that in Japan. And he drew that on the other side to the United States, where there's lax gun control laws, which is not totally true. There are lax gun control laws in some states. There are lax gun control laws in some states. And he did that juxtaposition. Now, for one, you have to question the culture of a place like Japan. What's the culture of a place like Japan? How many people in Japan are of the same race and same culture? Is Japan a transshipment point for drugs and guns? One of the points I always like to make when we're comparing countries is the cultural, ethnic makeup of the country. Japan is mostly one culture, one people. They're very racist over there, just by the way, and they have been that way for a very long time. Obviously, getting order in a country where everyone looks the same, believes the same thing, becomes much easier. It becomes much easier than in a country that is multicultural, where you have people who don't even believe the same things, people who believe totally opposing things. That's a whole different ball game. Now, the next piece to put into that equation is the fact that Japan's population is 126, around there. 126 million people live in Japan. 126. That's a lot more than Trinidad. What does that divide into? 126 divided by 1.3, sorry. What do we get there? 96.9, 97 times the size of Trinidad. Japan is 97 times the size of Trinidad. Now, with Japan being 97 times the size of Trinidad, anyone want to throw a guess out there as to what the murder rate in Japan is? How many people do you think die in Japan? They are 97 times the size of Trinidad. We are currently looking like we're heading up to mid 600s in the murder rate. Let's say it's 600 murders by the end of the year. 600 times 97. So Japan, if they're up there with our kind of murder rate, Japan is supposed to have 58,200 people dying by murder per year. You know, if they're comparable to our murder rate. Anyone wants to guess what Japan's murder rate is? No, we're not counting self-ending. Self-murder, we're not counting self-murder. Murder in Japan, their murder rate for 2021 was 874. The rate Trinidad is going at, it might be possible that Trinidad could end up with that murder rate this year. How can you talk about the gun control in Japan when these people are living a much safer life than us? If Trinidad's murder rate compared to their population was like Japan, then I could assure you no one would have been interested in guns. If 2 people were being murdered in Trinidad per year, people wouldn't have been interested in guns. So we have a country that is extremely violent, and at the same time we're saying with that extreme violence, we don't want you to be able to protect yourself. Barry Allen, you are talking garbage. Problem in Trinidad is because Afro-Trinis need to stop killing each other and holding the country to ransom. Is it only Afro-Trinis? Do you look at the murders? Do you look at the murders? Do you look at the ethnicity of the people involved in the murders? You are speaking nonsense that you are not knowledgeable about. The murders are location specific. The murders are demographic by wealth class specific. They are not that much race specific. So let's not go down that line. Let's not go down that line. And it's not Afro-Trinis as a whole group holding Trinidad to ransom. That is a ridiculous prospect. The problem that some racists, I'm not saying you are racist, but the problem that some racists have when they speak like that is they're unable to get the individualism in there. They're unable to understand that groups aren't monoliths. You may have more in common with a certain Afro-Trini than you may have with a wealthy, whatever your own race might be. 2 people that grew up in the same class situation may have a lot more in common than someone of their same race who grew up in a different class situation. So, no. But to go back to Dr. Rowley's point, to compare Japan and say that Japan has a lot of gun control laws and they have peace is nonsense. It makes no sense comparing to Trinidad and Tobago. And then in the same line to say that, in the same note to say that, well, we have all this violence, but you cannot protect yourself. That seems insane to me. If your job as the government is to provide security, and obviously, you are incapable of doing that, how can you at the same time tell people they cannot do it for themselves? I just do not understand how that makes sense. Good night, Minister. Good night, SM Resources. I just do not understand how that makes sense. And the idea that guns wouldn't protect people or make people safer sounds ridiculous when you understand that all of these leaders have their private ones home. If guns do not help you in protecting yourself, why do all of you have your own private firearms? Why do so many of you have armed guards surrounding you at all times? Massimo says even the example he gave with the United States is flawed because the US, even with more guns than people, still has less homicides per 100K than TNT. That is true. That was the next point I'm going to. If you look at the United States, the states that have the most liberalized gun laws, they are not the states with the highest murder rates. One of the cities with some of the highest, all of the cities with the highest murder rates have very strict gun laws in place. Here's the secret. Criminals don't care about laws. There's a statement among those in that pro-gun lobby where they say an armed society is a polite society. And I believe that. Listen. Fake police jumped a businessman's wall, kicked down his door, ran in the house, tied up his family, jumped back out. The businessman was able to get one of his trucks to block their entrance. They jumped the wall and run up the road. All of that happened. I can assure you, if that businessman or his family had firearms in that house, those good boys those good boys were never kicking down that door. They were never kicking down that door. And an armed society is a polite society, Ronnie, that one. They were never kicking down that door. What really breaks my heart, that sounds very hyperbolic, but it honestly, it hurts me to see. The thing that hurts me to see, when you see camera footage of bandits, that individual businessman might, but his family didn't. His daughter was there with her boyfriend. He didn't have a firearm. The daughter didn't have a firearm. His wife didn't have a firearm. 3 people were in that house without a firearm. If that businessman had left that firearm there and one of the 3 of them tried to pick it up and use it just so he could have ended up in trouble with that. So, yeah. The part that really hurts me is when I see camera footage and you see so often 3 men, 4 men run inside of somebody's house, kick down the door, jump through a door, jump through a window. And you could see in these men's mind, they have no consideration. They have no worry about anyone in there being able to fight back against them. Because they have the greater power with the gun. They have it. If you were able to keep guns out of the criminals' hands, and all we had to worry was if some fellas run in to try and beat we up or pull a cutlass or something like that, well, everybody have cutlass. We would not have been in the same predicament. But if you are unable to keep the guns out of the criminals' hands, then you cannot say that we as citizens, we don't need this for our protection. That does not make sense. I always say, how does it make sense that I as a citizen, I as a big grown man, could be sitting in my own house and men could come? I know men are outside my door. I could hear them outside my door and there's nothing I could do but cower in a corner. Or you know what else I could do? I could call 999 for them to put me through to the Shogunas police station. For the Shogunas police station to say, we'll call the Freeport police station. And when I call the Freeport police station, for them to hang up on me. And for me to call them again, and for them to hang up on me again. By the way, that was the series of events for that businessman while he was away from his family trying to contact the police to go protect them for him. That was the series of events. He called 999, nothing. He called Shogunas, nothing. He called Freeport, they hung up on him twice. I believe that because I've called Freeport before. How does that make sense? How do you justify that? How do you justify that? That's why that statement, that whole thing that Dr. Rowley used there, didn't make sense to me. Massimo says, true, they deny agency to the person. This reduces them to a victim that must be assisted constantly, which is somewhat demeaning and condescending in my eyes. I agree. What's the topic tonight? The topic right now, the topic previously was Tobago, but the topic right now is the little spat there is right now between the former commissioner and the prime minister, where they're talking about the gun rights, the firearm users licenses. And even in the corruption case, as you said, Rooney, he was not giving out those firearm users licenses fairly. Now, here's the thing. I have yet, in my reading, to see any, and the former commissioner said it himself, in the last decade, not one of the murders that occurred in Trinidad happened with a legal firearm. With someone who had a firearm user's license. Or was it 5 years? How can you make it sound like legal firearms are a real problem? You know, when we're looking at crime, we're looking at the legal firearms. And I remember Rastaman was saying this, Mr. Hines was saying this. I hear that, but that's not entirely true, Nathan. What are you talking about? Where was a firearm user's, where was a licensed firearm used for a murder? For a murder. I can't remember any. the murders I remember from legal firearm holders, ironically, the murder I hear from legal firearm owners are nearly all from police. Ironically, nearly all of the homicides or murders with legal firearms are from police. A man killed his wife in Trin City with his legal firearm. Right. Yeah. I always say that to, Sitgo. I say that. If someone were to just drop firearms, in the hands of every citizen in the country, I think that would be problems. Well, that still counts. Not really. That doesn't count on the FUL side, at least not how I see it going, because they don't have to go through the FUL process. That's not the process they go through for their guns. And whether they were granting licenses or not, those police would still have guns. They're the people that we are being told should be the only people in the country with guns. Ironically, they have one of the highest instance of domestic abuse. Like, that's facts. You could fight that if you want for the police in the chat. I'm not saying all of you are that, but the facts, the statistics say that police are one of the occupations that have some of the highest instances of domestic abuse. Yet they are the ones with the guns in the country either way. Firearms are a part of the solution, but it isn't the solution. Rachel Gloveman, I said that at the very beginning. When he said that firearms will not solve the crime problem in Trinidad, I said, I agree. That is true. Legal firearms to the citizens in the country who qualify for it will not solve the crime problem in Trinidad and Tobago. To be honest, it might not even stop a lot of the murders, because the vast majority of the murders occurring in Trinidad are gang related. And the thing is, many of those gang members are armed. Many of those gang members are armed. So that may not stop the level of murders going on in the country right now. I just want my gun to protect me. All right. Now, what Double G said. No, Keith Rowley. Your mistake is that you wanted and you hoped that Gary Griffith would be a puppet and take directions from a government. I had no intention to do so. So you have disregarded the crime statistics. You have disregarded the public trust and confidence in the police. You have disregarded what the country wants and who the country wanted as a commissioner of police. Griffith said the justification of the firearms issue was comical, as he claimed that during his tenure as commissioner of police, a senior government minister harassed him to provide explosives for a friend in Tobago without OSHA approval, for a special gun to kill pigs, and for FULs to be fast-tracked for his friends. On 3 occasions, this is Mr. Griffith speaking, this is Mr. Griffith, not me. On 3 occasions, you, Rowley, have specifically handpicked persons, paid them big money, and then tried to get them to write reports that you may like. The country did not buy it, Keith Rowley. You played your hand and lost. He added that no one had been arrested over legal firearms being issued to the public, and that 100% of the murders in the past 3 years were committed with illegal guns. I, Gary Griffith, ensured, yes, that legal firearms must be provided to law-abiding citizens to protect them from criminal elements. You, Keith Rowley, and your government have spent more time targeting law-abiding citizens getting legal firearms than criminal elements who have illegal firearms. I want a fighting chance. I might die in it, but I want to take one with me, Rooney says. Okay. I am too, Sitko. I am. It's ridiculous that all of this is going on in the public too. It is. It's unbecoming. Nathan Rosen says, someone once told me they don't want no gun for the police to hire a thief to take it from him to rent it to criminal. Oh, jeez. But did he lie though? I don't know. I don't know. And the thing is, even the report that Dr. Rowley is using to discredit the former commissioner, that report criticizes the police service in general way more than it criticizes the last commissioner. That report suggests that there is a burgeoning underground criminal enterprise being run out of the police service. That's not only an indictment on the former commissioner of police. All the I don't know if all, but I have yet to hear, as Mr. Griffith pointed out, even one officer fired over the allegations inside of that. So then, how can the officers who were engaged in the racket still be employed as members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service while you're trying to use that same report to discredit the man who was the commissioner before? If you're saying that the worst decision was hiring him because of the bacchanal that went on in the firearm users licensing department, then that whole department has to be fired. How could you keep everyone else that was involved in the racket? Only the commissioner goes and you think that solves the problem. What? How does that make any kind of sense? Ain't reached the DPP yet, I guess. Well, that's what I would have to guess too. That's what I would have to guess too. But then, if it hasn't reached the DPP yet, that means the investigation hasn't finished yet. And if the investigation hasn't finished yet, how can the Prime Minister use the investigation to discredit the former commissioner? Then he's jumping the gun on the investigation. You cannot use it to discredit the former commissioner, then at the same time say that it isn't finished yet to be able to discredit the other police officers involved. That doesn't make sense. There needs to be some consistency. Where's the consistency? I find Dr. Rowley needs some lessons in speaking to people. That's my honest opinion. He does not speak well to people. And I think he is going to run up against problems with smart populist candidates, because Dr. Rowley and the PNM represents the epitome of that elitist politician vibe. You see, the same thing we were talking about earlier that happened in the United States with Donald Trump, and they wanted to get rid of their elites in politics, and they were willing to choose anyone to go in there to just mash up the dance. I think the PNM and Dr. Rowley stand that kind of chance too, because of how he speaks to people. It nearly always seems like he's speaking to you from atop a pedestal looking down on you. Like, I get the principle that no student likes vibe from him all the time. And I understand you are doing a serious job here. You aren't out here to play kicks and try to make friends necessarily. Okay, I understand that. But at the same time, you are in a position as the leader of the country. That is a social position. You have to be able to deal with people. His tone, it doesn't work for me. It really doesn't cut it for me. And it leans directly into that elitist thing that the PNM already has. The PNM already has that elitist classist vibe going on. I regularly say it, the two parties aren't on the same field. PNM is not a racist party. They aren't based on race. UNC is more based on race. If you don't like that, well, that's just the fact of it. PNM is, however, much more based on class. That seems pretty obvious to me. That seems pretty obvious to me. And that kind of behavior leans more into that kind of elitism. For example, another example of that to me is the whole business with the scrap iron guys. That seems so elitist and heavy-handed from on top. You heard his response? Yes. I heard that response. I did hear that response, Nisi, where he pointed out that if he did get horn, and he's saying he didn't. But if he did, he could take it, and he wouldn't need to kill anyone. Ooh, spicy. At the end of the day, he's supposed to be serving the people. That hasn't been happening since 2015. Jonathan J. Henry says, it's my opinion. Casper Dre 2 says, when I see Anil Roberts calling him a dictator, I tend to agree. Now, I wouldn't go that far. And here's why I wouldn't go that far. I remember that the opposition called Mr. Manning a dictator. Like, I mean, it's so ridiculous. I don't try to take my talking points for other politicians from their opposing politicians. They called Mr. Manning a dictator. And then they flipped around and called Dr. Rowley a dictator. They said that Dr. Rowley was an upstanding man with integrity who stood up against Patrick Manning, and that shows Patrick Manning is a horrible man. Look, Dr. Rowley, this man of integrity, stood up against Manning, and they did use that in the 2010 elections against Mr. Manning, and then turning around now to say that Manning warned us about Dr. Rowley, and like, please don't try to chain me up like my memory lasts for 7 days. My head is big for a reason. My memory works. I remember they used Dr. Rowley's criticism of Mr. Manning to say that it makes us correct about Mr. Manning. Then used Mr. Manning's criticism of Dr. Rowley to say it makes us correct about Dr. Like, ease me up with the politics. I remember them calling Mr. Manning a dictator, and the man called an election when it seemed like people didn't want him. It seemed like people didn't want him, and he called an election. That does not sound like a dictator. And to call Dr. Rowley a dictator here makes no sense. I think that his party is elitist, and he comes off as condescending. However, that does not make him dictatorial. What about him is dictatorial? Like, people use that without understanding what a dictator is. The leader of the UNC is way more authoritarian and dictatorial than Dr. Rowley. Look at how she runs her party. She is losing election after election after election and will not leave the party leadership. That's dictatorial tendencies. That is dictatorial tendencies. A dictator isn't just someone you don't like. A dictator isn't just someone you don't like their decisions, isn't just someone who is governing badly. A dictator is something specific. There's someone who wants to hold on to power regardless of what the population wants. They want to rule with an iron fist, regardless of what the population wants. We aren't in that sphere yet. We aren't even near in that sphere yet. So, like, I find that's a big part of my problem, even with the UNC. That's a big part of my problem, even with the UNC. Like, if you're criticizing, criticize smartly, criticize on accurate things. Kamala keeps getting reelected. She keeps getting reelected internally because she has moved the Sir, Mr. Wet-Led, I read the news every night. I went through the news during the internal elections when the UNC had their whole party machinery, their general party machinery, working to get Miss Kamala Prasad re-elected. People within the UNC, fellow UNC members, willingly admit that no one can win her with the current setup they have internally. Bear in mind, these parties are private corporations. They can run it basically how they want. And they do. So looking at how she runs the UNC, her running of the UNC is much more dictatorial than Dr. Rowley's behavior. So you don't think Rowley will or did the same? No, I do not. The PNM has their internal elections coming in December. I can assure you the PNM would not run their internal elections the same way. And this isn't me saying I prefer the PNM or anything like that. This is me saying what I've always said about the two parties. The PNM, being that elitist classist structure, has a very rigid structure. They have a very rigid structure. The PNM has a way stronger structure. The PNM has a way stronger structure than the UNC. It's much harder for someone to have that iron fist over the PNM unless you reincarnate Eric Williams. Why are so many are focusing on the UNC? Because this country, Danny Cannock, you see, here's the thing, Mr. Danny Cannock. I'll tell you before they hit it on you. What you don't know is the people with the moderator tag you see above their names, they can mute you. So if you try to spam and speak nonsense in the chat, we're here speaking sense. That's what we do here. If you try to do that, you will be muted. If you do it too much and you try to do it again, you will be kicked off. Because we're trying to have a sensible conversation. So please keep it sensible. Anyway, I do not believe that he's a dictator. That is a political talking point. It's ridiculous. However, I do believe that they are quite elitist. And this whole business with the scrap iron industry was a master stroke in that to me. When you look at how the scrap iron, they did it with the scrap iron industry, these men have been begging for a year, for more than a year. They've been out there saying, please come talk to us. Come discuss this with us. We have ideas about how to possibly solve this. Come, let's talk together and try and figure this out together. They didn't do any of that. They came out and said, you know what? 6 months ban. And we will discuss among ourselves to see how we could best figure this out. While you all do not get to work. Casper, but let's be honest, forget PNM, forget UNC. Answer me this. Do you think that Trinidad is independent? I don't understand the full intent of that question. Yes, we celebrate our Independence Day. We are independent. But if you mean independent from outside forces, then obviously not. Then in that case, which country is independent from outside forces? There's none. There are no countries that are independent from outside forces. That's the whole global environment that we live in right now. So if by that note, if that's what you mean, then in that note, no country is really independent. But if you're talking Samram, you could get muted too. If you're talking generally, then yes, of course we are independent. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. And for the person who says a dictator is someone who rules the whole country, yes and no. It's not just someone who rules the whole country. It's generally someone who rules the country, usually taken by force and kept by force. We don't have that here. And usually someone with really authoritarian tendencies. So you have to have those two in a combination. It's not just someone who rules. Otherwise, everyone who rules will be a dictator. Roderick Griffith says, my family doing charity in Trinidad over 20 years. In the last 5 years, many more people are struggling, I guess you were meaning to see. Well, there is a pandemic too, so that could be part of the reality of the struggle. That could be part of it. And then there's the reality of oil prices. That is a reality. And because we do not have a very decentralized economy, because a lot of our eggs are in the one oily basket, when oil prices drop, we suffer. When they raise, we get to spend like crazy. So the partnership was in power during a bump. Mr. Manning was in power during a bump. And then there has been a bit of a lull. And now there goes a bump again. So the prices of oil determine the money that we get in our country. Official Suspects Auto, just hit me up in the inbox. On TikTok, on Instagram, over on Facebook, anywhere you find me, hit me up in my inbox and you can get the hats or the t-shirts. They are for sale. Yes, they are. All right. Yeah. When the oil raise, we give back money. All right, Von 868, that is actually correct. That, that is actually correct. When the oil raised, we could pay back some money and we could borrow some more. Strange place, strange place we live in. And some of the strange things that we see on with that is that we spend money like, money isn't a problem for certain things. And we're seeing right now the public service is demanding more than 4%. The public service is demanding more than 4%. And the country seems to not have that money. And then the public, I saw the unions in the public service were kind of giving a covert threat that, they can't control all the members in their union, and the members are getting frustrated and they will just do something. Cisco Smith says the PNM never takes responsibility for their faults, always blaming citizens for problems they cause. I wouldn't doubt that, but that seems typical of politicians to me. Politicians, that seems a typical thing of them. It's always some other thing that caused that. It's never really my fault. To me, Casper J says, I see the lowering of the Union Jack as simply replacing the Queen with the... Ooh. I don't agree with that necessarily, though. I don't agree with that. I think that 1% talk in Trinidad is a ruse. The 1% talk in Trinidad is a ruse to bring up a racial point. There are many Indo-Trinidadians, there are many Afro-Trinidadians who by wealth also belong to the 1%. The big boy in Clico, I don't know if you remember what he looks like, but he wasn't a typical Syrian-looking guy. That 1%, if you want to actually talk about 1%, you have to talk about the economic group and the finesse, and I'll put this was a master finesse by Mrs. Kamala Prasad, Bisesa. The master finesse she did on that is that she spoke about 1% and then pulled out the economic class out of that 1%, because here's a secret. Kamala Prasad Bisesa is in the 1%. But she removed herself and removed that 1% from the economic standpoint and placed it on a racial standpoint. And many people went off on the racial standpoint, forgetting that the 1% statement was introduced based on economics. Not race, economics. So, do I believe that the legitimate 1%, the actual 1% in terms of economic class in Trinidad, have a lot of say? Obviously they do. I remember, good night Hotfoot Sarah, I remember a certain contractor who got quite a lot of money, and when it seemed like the walls were closing in, he sold everything, sold it off on a barge to Panama, and then headed to Canada to live out the rest of his life in luxury. That was not a Syrian man. No, he left Panama. He's in Canada. That was not a Syrian man. Samram, you were spamming. Ooh, that rhymes. Samram, you were spamming. That's why you weren't kicked out. You were muted. The repeated spam gets the mute. But I don't mind any other talk. Let's keep it, sensible. But yeah, the one, and to me, almost all the time I hear people talk about the 1%, they pull it to a racial thing, and that's what gets me thrown off from that. Well, from the time you pull it to a racial thing, I'm like, whoa. And to say, like someone said earlier, the lowering of the Union Jack was just replacing the Union Jack with a specific family down here, well, that doesn't actually make sense, because at that point in time, that family wasn't even at the economic power they are at now. So how does that even add up? It doesn't that doesn't actually add up like that. Now, if the point you're trying to make is that in nearly every country in the world, the wealthiest people have a lot of say, that's very true. And especially in corrupt countries like ours, we know our country is by and large quite corrupt. If the country is more corrupt, then of course the wealthiest people, as the old saying goes, who have more corn feed more fowl. Anybody knows that saying? Who have more corn feed more fowl? Massimo over on Instagram asked, do you think TNT has Dutch disease? To some extent, yes. Where the good news harms us, yeah, to some extent we do. The 1% are not who you think. These people use Trinidad as vacation spots. If you're talking about the global 1%, then that's a whole different thing. All right. Yeah, we reached 11. We went tonight. Any further questions or comments before I dive out? Anything further? Nice talk, Roderick Griffith says. Thank you, sir. Can we discuss the housing system in Trinidad? I would like to. In fact, that night we did discuss that. I would like to do that. Sam says no before I get banned. You will not get banned for discussing things. When you're starting your party, I don't. Was it you who asked that question before? I don't necessarily believe that many of our solutions are in politics. I believe a lot of our solutions are in culture. That's what I'm trying to do to some extent. To some extent, I believe a lot of the solutions that we're looking for are not in politics. And the idea that we could look to politics to find these solutions is part of the problem in and of itself. A lot of the problems in Trinidad has to do with the culture. If we could, as a people, talk more, discuss more, have a better understanding of the whole political climate, have an understanding of what politics is, have an understanding of what the state is, have an understanding of what we should be expecting from the state, what we should be looking for from the state, well, then we would be in a better position. Like maybe if we're there, then maybe we could try to talk about who we want in politics, but we need that cultural change. And for the person asking about the time I start, the time is usually 9 p.m. or 9:15 p.m., one out of the two, somewhere thereabouts. And if you're looking to catch up on what was said, my YouTube channel is over on YouTube. Nathan Springer over on YouTube. You could head over there, subscribe, and you can catch all the other lives. This is Mindful Live 124. As that would suggest, there are 123 others out there. You can head over to YouTube and see what we talk about. There are other videos there also. But as a local, I can't even get land for that price. Listen, sir, I saw that in Guyana, you can buy a 5-bedroom house and land for 500 KTTD. Yeah, you can. But you aren't getting any disagreement with me on that. Trinidad and the land prices and the whole housing business. As a millennial, you understand the struggle. But that seems to be a millennial problem kind of all over the world, where the nature of how economics was done somewhere between the 60s and the 90s, it made it much more difficult for millennials to own things. Like millennials are earning a fair amount of money, but most of our money could only be spent on consumption. It's very hard to get into that ownership level. Those boomers own everything. The boomers and them. Good night, people. I remind the house. Yo, 1.6 million USD. Wow. Yeah, when I see those properties, I just watch them and wish them well. Like if you're someone in a legal job, in the general flow of things, you start off at $8,000 per month. How are you supposed to buy property for a family out here? Pain. Totally understood. All right, folks, I will be here again to talk to you all and discuss the news, etc., etc. See Rhea jumping over there on Instagram. I will be here again tomorrow trying building a house. Well, I do build houses. That's part of what I do, contracting. And those prices, scary. The 8K per month sounds nice about now. The prices, the building, jeez. But lumber and steel went down a little bit recently, so that's a bonus, but the prices are insane. Instead. We're not really still live in area. We're leaving now. We're just leaving for a while now. Are you going, Springer Bro? Yes, yes. Yes, I am. I've said that quite a bit. But the questions usually come less these days. Building material does make you cry. Yep, they do. All right, folks, I will see you guys again tomorrow for the next Mindful Live at 9 p.m. or 9:15. I will be there. If I'm not, you could join my Discord server. That can be found on my profile right here on TikTok, or right there on TikTok. If you were looking at this on YouTube or Instagram, go over to TikTok and look on my profile. There's a Discord server there. You can hit that and join. And we're planning a meetup. The meetup is supposed to be very soon, and we'll tell you the location of that over on the meetup. So you can head over there to the Discord server if you are so interested. And I will see you again tomorrow. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained. And I will see you guys for the next Mindful Live tomorrow. Peace.